Welcome to a video on the new Range Rover Velar R Dynamic HSE, and you'd best be ready to pony up about $78,000 to have the privilege of driving this. Let's get into the finer details. Really what it boils down to is Land Rover is selling an image here. Range Rover has this level of prestige for an SUV, and they're trying to take this to the next level. If you're somebody that is a fashion-forward type person that puts a lot of form over function in many cases, you're going to love this. And I'm just going to say it flat out. From the material choices to this kind of stainless door inserts to the piano gloss finish across the whole center stack, the screens, the leather stitching on the upper and middle parts of the dashboard, the steering wheel design with the alloys, the LED style buttons that kind of disappear when you're not using it. You see it all over this cabin. Now, while some of it is very striking, it has a big wow factor, namely with this white interior, there are some negatives to it. But let's go over the positives first. Now, if you want to be in a calm sanctuary, you better have comfortable seats, and the Velar does not disappoint. With this ebony Windsor color, it really sets off the mood. Now, your seating control is really intuitive. It's got excellent range of adjustment. Lumbar, your headrests are electronically adjustable up and down, and you have electronically adjustable thigh cushions. No manual adjustment here, so you can really get dialed in the way that you want. Now, it also has heated and cooled seats. Both work pretty well, and the coolers are not too noisy. And you have a massage function in the infotainment. Now, it only covers kind of the lumbar and middle part of the back, and it kind of goes up and down, but it's pretty dainty. It's like a 3-year-old kind of nubbing at you. So if you're somebody that needs a deep tissue massage, well, you're gonna have to look elsewhere. The next huge pro to the Velar's interior is its level of fit and finish. Everything feels really tightly put together in here. There's not any cheapness in the feeling of the plastics or the leather materials or any of that. Now, there is some creaking in here when you drive, namely when you go over kind of bumps, but that's because it's freezing out. You know, you have that expansion and contraction, but everything just feels really good to the touch. And it does, again, it has that wow factor to it when you first get in here for most people. Now, there's some other subtleties you're going to appreciate in the Velar, like the frameless rear view mirror, the metal grid and the windshield to help defrost the front window for you without having to wait for the HVAC controls to kick in. The activity key, which you can wear around your wrist, and you can activate this, so if you're going to a beach or swimming and you don't want to carry the key with you, you can wear this on your wrist and come back to the car and unlock it. I mean, there's subtle things here that they're doing and really trying on that is pretty cool overall. And I think a lot of people that are going to get this are going to appreciate that. But let's get on to some of the cons. Now, in the fashion industry, you constantly hear how you can't look good without a little bit of pain. And there's some high heel-like features that the Velar has I'm going to talk about, like these exterior door handles. They go inside the body and then pop out when it's time to open the door. Looks cool, right? That is until you realize it creates an additional step to get in the car. I come up to the door, hit unlock, and I gotta wait for the handle to come out before I open it. Or if you're in a bad climate like me, we get ice or freezing rain. You get this side of the car coated with ice, you come out in the morning, and you can't open the car because the door handle won't come out. It's something just to be aware of. The next thing that concerns me is this rotary style shift dial. But if you're okay with that, and you're okay with the shiny piano gloss black plastic that's covered in fingerprints and dust all the time, you're okay with cleaning that, you won't be okay with the micro scratches that are around this dial. Because this thing's only got about 4,000 or 5,000 miles on it, and there are scratches all around it from people turning the knob or wearing cufflinks or jewelry. It's all just covered in scratches, and you can't fix it. You have to replace it. So this is something they could remedy with a scratch-resistant surface like Gorilla Glass or something you use on phones that won't do that. The second thing is this silver bar here that says Land Rover to release the cup holder. It's way too reflective. In fact, when I have this moonroof open in the middle of the day and the sun's coming in, this is always blinding me. So this is something they might consider, changing the surface material of. Now it's time to talk about technology, something that their marketing is pushing on the Velar. And a lot of it has to do with this center gauge cluster and their dual screen infotainment called the Touch Pro Duo. And I looked at this and I thought, this kind of looks like Ford Sync in terms of colors. And sure enough, it's yet another infotainment system that is designed by Panasonic Automotive. And this was done in the UK. Now, Panasonic has been doing infotainment in cars for a while, and they were also doing like single DIN head units back forever ago in the 80s and 90s. So this is their work modified by Land Rover to suit them. So you have two 10-inch displays. Both are 2K resolution. So they're high def, really clean, really smooth looking. And the whole thing that Land Rover wants to do here is eliminate a lot of the physical buttons and control. Remember the cleanliness that they're trying to pursue and in terms of look and feel in here. And for the most part that it works. The user interface is pretty smooth and pretty intuitive. Your top screen is pretty much all your infotainment. You can swipe left and right like a tablet. You can create your own home screen with your own icons, like I have the ambient lighting or clock, and of course the functions that you use the most, so you don't have to screw around with this a lot. Now then you have your media, navigation. Your mapping software works really well. It looks good. The pinch to zoom is fast. Your media controls are pretty intuitive. It's media controls. You have Sirius XM, you have, USB, you have your Bluetooth connectivity and your phone screen. And then of course, all your sub menus with eco data, where it shows you how you're doing with fuel economy, your dynamic eye mode, which will show you once you're in dynamic mode, it will show you your performance meters, such as your throttle and brake position. You can see what you're doing there with the pedals, a G-force meter, a lap timer, which is laughable, and then of course all your individual settings for dynamic mode, engine, gear shift mode, steering, suspension. So you can kind of set the firmness or aggressiveness of each of these modes. Now the top screen can be disabled, and you can adjust the kind of rake of the screen to avoid glare. And this is exactly how every car should be doing their infotainment, building it into the dash where it's integrated. And I'm going to say I have a hats off my bald head to Land Rover for doing this, because this is how I've always pictured infotainment being done. You put it in the dash, you have a widescreen display, done. You don't have to stick some generic thing on top of the dashboard. It's a really good implementation of it. Now, you can turn off this screen, of course, and then only use the bottom one, which is pretty much for your HVAC controls with rotary knobs, your seat heaters, your drive modes for dynamic, eco, comfort, gravel, snow, all that, and then your all-terrain modes for the all-wheel drive system or four-wheel drive system, because that's what Land Rover and Range Rover is about. You can still take this as much as it is tarted up. You can take it off onto some trails, and all these modes help you to do it. And all of this is pretty good, except for the fact that it is extremely slow to boot up. It's not as fast as it should be. There's a lot of lag in the input. A lot of times it doesn't pick up my touches. I have to touch it twice. Sometimes it freezes up altogether. And this is what happens with technology in cars, infotainment. Onto the gauge cluster. You can full screen the maps. You can full screen certain things. You can go to 1 gauge, 2 gauges. You can kind of configure it the way you want, but the biggest problem with it is the physical controls that are on the steering wheel, which also kind of change. The LEDs light up if you're not using the function. The volume can be touch sensitive or pushing it. But when you go into the menus, it's constantly lagging. It doesn't respond to clicks. It's slow to respond, or just doesn't work at all. And then I'm backing out of the menu sometimes because it's easy to push the wrong direction on here. Even though it's kind of touch sensitive too, I don't know, it just feels really flaky to me depending on the situation. And it's just something you want to set it the way you want to set it and just never touch it again. Now, getting into the back seats, these are extremely comfortable. You got plenty of room back here. You have a center armrest. You can recline electronically with the switch that's somewhere here. You can go forward and back, and then you have your own HVAC controls back here, which are very similar to the front with the rotary dial. It's very user-friendly. The vents are easy to control. It's a really nice space back here and it's a really good vehicle for pretty much 5 passengers. I have almost no complaints about the headroom or just the way you get in and out. I wish the doors swung open a little bit farther, but that's about my only complaint. Last but not least is the rear hatch, and this is an electronic liftgate. It's pretty slow, but for the most part it's on average what most of the industry is. You have a ton of space and really good tie-down areas here, and you don't see this in a lot of cars or SUVs. You have the metal tie-downs where you can strap your cargo down or whatever you're moving around. It's really nice. Nothing's gonna move. Your controls to flip down the seats are mechanical, which is probably a good thing for the most part because you don't have to worry about the electronics breaking. You have power outlets back here, and then you have a button to raise and lower the cargo floor, which is really handy if you're shorter or if you're taller and you have a lot of stuff you're loading in here. And because of the air compressor, it works really fast. This is not some like cheesy up and down. There's a lot of range of adjustment here. So I think most people are gonna like this in terms of cargo use. It's pretty good. Welcome to the In the Shop segment with the Range Rover Velar on the BendPak lift. Now, you've seen the montage of the exterior. You've seen the interior technology, and I could even go on longer for that. But now is your opportunity to take a look at the underpinnings of what makes the Velar work. Now, Land Rover has a long history and pedigree of creating off-road vehicles that still have a level of luxury that combine kind of a truck-like utility and a car-like ride. And that's difficult to do. The Velar uses double wishbone suspension in the front end. And this is all aluminum, everything. The lower control arms, the fork, the upper A-arm, the knuckle design, the dust shield. In fact, this vehicle is the body is almost entirely comprised of aluminum and mostly recycled aluminum where they could afford to do so. Now, you talk about something like this when you say truck or SUV. This has a legitimate usable approach angle. It maintains about 9.5 inches of ground clearance between the ground and the side sills or frame. The second thing it can do, it has a wade depth of 26 inches or thereabouts, which means you can completely submerge this front end underwater up to that depth. And a lot of that takes a lot of work in terms of body adhesives, sealants, and there's a heavy use of body adhesives on here. Well, partly because it's aluminum, and then the other part is, well, you don't want water getting in. Now, the R dynamic trim level comes with air suspension standard, and this is exactly how you want to option this vehicle if you plan to do any type of off-road driving, because it makes the most of the terrain management system. And if you don't get the air suspension, you lose about 2 inches of ground clearance, so that's something to note. If you have zero plans to drive off-road, don't get the air suspension, it's just a waste. Now in the front, you will see a combined air spring and shock absorber assembly. In the rear of the Velar is where things get more interesting. You have these massive aluminum lower control arms and the aluminum knuckle design that houses this huge air spring assembly. And this is what helps to raise and lower the back of the car. It helps you to lower the load floor when you're getting out or loading up cargo and gives you that ground clearance that you're looking for. It also includes a traditional shock absorber, and this is to help with additional load or towing, which the Velar is capable of towing about 5,500 pounds if you're interested in that. For the most part, you're going to see a stamped steel subframe here. There's not an aluminum carrier, and a stamped steel lower control arm that is for tow adjustment. And you'll also see the links here that help to kind of neutralize the suspension change or camber angle and tow angle when the car raises and lowers itself. So it tries to maintain a neutral alignment at all times. Now, it doesn't always stay in high mode or low mode, of course, and it tries to level itself back out and go to a normal ride height during normal driving. I say this a lot. Sometimes you get what you pay for, and a lot of your money is going to be going towards Land Rover's extensive history at designing suspension systems, versatile suspension systems. In the case of the Velar with the air suspension, you can literally drive this like a sports car with the aid of the locking differential, its electronic control, its ability to lower itself. You can literally put this in manual mode, shift this, and almost spin the thing out because of all the power that goes to the rear. And that's part of the dynamic experience. And then you just put it in auto mode or off-road mode. It raises itself up. It becomes more soft. You can take it on trails. You can put it in water. It's just crazy what you're capable of doing with this. And it works. Now, The cons are there. This is extremely complicated, and if you're going to own this out of warranty, you can best believe that things like this air spring module and all the associated electronics and the aluminum components, if you ball this thing up, are going to be excessively expensive. If you're prepared for that, or you might even prepare to have an extended warranty put on this, then just enjoy it and drive it. Now, before we talk about that, it's time to talk about weight and balance, which is an incredibly important part of car development or SUV development. And Land Rover spent a ton of time on this architecture because this is one of only 4 Range Rover products. This is their 4th one. It's brand new for them, and they wanted to do it right. And when I checked my tablet for the vehicle weight, I actually lifted the vehicle back up, re-zeroed out the scales again, because I couldn't believe it was only 4,800 pounds with a full tank of fuel, which means all this aluminum and weight savings has worked. And the better part is weight distribution. It's almost 50-50 front to rear. And the cross weight's about 52%, but that's not too bad. But really, they did a good job with this. Now, onto the engine. If you're in the US and you have the money for it, just get this 3-liter V6 supercharged motor, or the P380 option. It is more than most anybody is ever gonna want. It is so quick, it is so fun to drive. You have dual air boxes, it sounds good. You hear a little bit of supercharger whine. I'm not gonna spoil it. Let's just get right into the driving segment with the Velar. Yes. Setting off in the Range Rover Velar. I already feel like a celebrity, or I just signed a max contract, because that's what this is all about. Most of it is just about style points over anything else. This is supposed to make you feel good. It's supposed to match your fashion senses. And now driving it on the road. Combining Range Rover and Land Rover's history for making off-road capable or SUV-like trucks, this is the next evolution of it. It feels bigger than the Evoque. It feels more masculine than the Evoque. It just, really what it boils down to is, how does this thing drive? Because I say this all the time, looks are only a part of it. Well, looks are a major part of this. Driving it better be good for the price tag. So what you'll notice just cruising around is this is an extremely quiet cabin. There's nothing that jumps out at you except for the fact that I do hear some creaks and rattles in here, and mostly because it's cold out, you can tell that the fit and finish inside of this cabin is really tight. Now, those rattles might go away, especially after you get over uneven pavement. Like if I'm turning and going over a bump, I hear creaks and rattles in the back. As those plastics relax in the heat, that probably might get better. Now as we come up to this stop, you know, the stability and traction control system is really aggressive in this. And I've noticed this on the highway, if you go over bumps and are accelerating or pretty much anything, when you mash it, it's kind of cutting your power immediately. But it feels safe all the time. The ESC system is always kind of doing what it's supposed to do to keep the whole car going straight. And I think for most people that are going to drive this, this is a go straight vehicle. Now the biggest thing to talk about with a vehicle like this is how it handles over broken pavement. And this is where the Velar is kind of disappointed me, I'll be completely honest. I feel like it should be way better over broken and choppy pavement than it is. And I just got out of the BMW 640i with air suspension, and that thing was absolutely unbelievable over every pavement surface. It was so smooth. And then I got in here, and this has advanced air suspension too, but there's way too much shock that transmits into the driver's seat and into the whole cabin in general. I know there's some trade-offs to making a truckish SUV And I think this still has the underpinnings to be that off-road capable vehicle. You just still feel a truckish ride when the pavement gets really rough. Now, handling, because of all the different drive modes, you have a vehicle setting on the screen where you can toggle your different drive modes here, from eco to comfort, which I always leave it in comfort, and then auto, and then of course dynamic. And dynamic is kind of the road going track setting or performance setting. It allows you the most slip angle, it allows you the most fun to be had without the traction and stability control trying to hamper all the horsepower. Now let's get right into that. You go into dynamic mode, you come to a stop, you hold down your traction control off for about 5 seconds. It will turn off the DSC. You throw this thing into sport, hit the paddle to go into first gear, kind of bring up the revs. Man. That's where this thing is at its best. Man, does this thing move. And it's partly because of supercharger. I'm a huge fan of superchargers on street cars, and largely because it feels so good all the time. You get a little bit of the supercharger whine, and then it just propels you all the time. There's no turbo lag. It feels like a naturally aspirated car. Now, I want to talk about the transmission a little bit. This is a ZF 8-speed, like this is being used in so many vehicles now, and for the most part, it is extremely smooth. I'm very happy with it. The only time, and I notice the straight pipes mention this, it's the way that it downshifts in automatic mode. If you're in automatic and you're in like 8th gear and you don't even know what gear it is, you mash down the throttle and there's like this, you feel it downshifting every gear before it gets in the gear that you want, and it's really annoying because there's such a lag and delay. It's like it's not able to queue up the right gear. It can't skip enough gears to get down in the gear you need. So really, if you're driving this like a maniac or you're just crazy, you want to drive it in manual mode. Just take control of the paddles, it'll let you shift, or just put it in sport mode all the time. That's when it's at its best, transmission wise. Now let's be totally real. You're not going to drive it in dynamic mode. You're not going to use the paddle shifters unless you enjoy controlling the transmission manually. You're going to leave this in automatic and comfort mode almost all the time. You're never going to notice any transmission problems. It's really good 90% of the time. And the transmission and the motor are the Velar's best point. I mean, you can argue the interior quality and the technology and all that, and the style over function, but for the most part, I've had my most enjoyable time just kind of pushing this thing. It's so quiet, the motor's so great, the trans is so rewarding, and it's pretty comfortable overall. And that's what this is about. For the most part, this is going to be that city, suburban, just I'm going to lay back and cruise type vehicle. Now I'm going to come to a stop here, and I have the traction stability control off. Now, when you're turning and you got to get out fast, again, with this stability system off, you can just peg it, and you feel rotation. You feel that back end wanting to kick out. It's amazing, and that's when you also get full control over the transmission. Yeah. It will let you hit the rev limiter when you have the stability and traction control off, and in manual mode it will let you bounce off the rev limiter. It won't shift gears for you, but if you don't have the stability system off, it will auto upshift. So that's just something to note. I'm going to throw this back into comfort mode, automatic mode, stability and traction on like you would always drive it. And really what it boils down to with this Velar is you're going to buy this for pretty much status. You're going to buy it for status and just rolling around town. You're going to feel pretty pimp driving it. And, does it do things better than other vehicles as a street car? No. I think the main problem for me is the suspension. It's just not soft enough. It should be way softer than it is. But the truth is you can really take this off-road and on trails. And, that's where it becomes confusing because you're trying to make this luxury off-roader. And you know what? if you're gonna off-road a lot, you just buy a truck. You know, you don't buy this because you're just gonna destroy it. The interior's not gonna hold up if you're going off on the mud. I mean, it's just a weird idea to make this luxury off-road combination, but I know that it works well, and I know the type of people that want it just want it. They would never consider a truck. So if you're okay with that, style, mostly comfort, great transmission and engine, you're gonna be tickled pink with this. You just gotta find a place to put all your purses and handbags. Final thoughts on the Range Rover Velar. When I first got in this vehicle, I didn't understand it at all. And that bothered me because this is the first modern Land Rover I've been in. So I spent a ridiculous amount of time doing research, driving this more in different ways than I typically do, including playing around with all the technology. And it would literally take you over a week to get through all of the stuff that this car and this SUV can and cannot do. And I figured it out. This was a very focused vehicle for them. It was an important vehicle for them, and it's aimed at a very specific demographic. Those who appreciate modern aesthetics. They use a lot of words in their marketing like reductionism to smooth out areas and reduce things or eliminate things that don't need to be there that affect the overall appearance of this SUV. And the result is it's one of the best looking SUVs on the market. And it combines a little bit of the kind of feminism in the Evoque and a new masculinity to it. And I think a lot of people are gonna like this. The interior space is pretty clean. It's mostly well put together. I do have some gripes about some of the quality issues and material choices, and I think they can improve that. That's simple stuff. The foundation is really solid here. It's still Land Rover underneath. The balance is good. It drives good. The ZF transmission is really good, and this supercharged motor is such a joy to just pound around. And I think when you combine all of it together and you look at the good and the bad, if you're somebody that's looking for a Range Rover product, I can't see why you wouldn't choose this aside from price, obviously. I mean, it is expensive when you spec it out, but this is definitely one of the better SUVs I've ever driven on multiple levels, and I hope they continue to improve this. I'll be curious to see how this thing holds up over time. All right, take care. I'll see you next video.